Hey, this is my commentary track for Spider-Man 2, released in 2004, directed by Sam Raimi. Now, the question that might be going through some people's minds right now, if you're actually listening to this, God forbid, is why? Why is the question of the day? Well, I did a commentary track for Steven Spielberg's 1975 classic Jaws, and, I figured it just made sense that since I did a commentary track for Jaws, the next movie I should do a commentary track for is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, released in 2004. It just made sense. I really miss that old Marvel Studios logo that we saw back when it was actually the comic books flipping by. I miss that. I also think it's funny they kind of just put a red color scheme over basically the same kind of thing as the first one. But hey, it's fun. And the third one, it kind of looks similar to the first one. It's like a darkish blue or something. Or maybe it's a lighter blue. I don't know. Or maybe it's a white. I don't know. Now, I will say these opening illustrations done by Alex Ross for these opening credits are really nice. I really love the style of them because they're clearly trying to evoke that comic book aesthetic, but I think it could have gone a little too far, or it could have looked a little tacky if they're like, oh, we're gonna make it look like a comic book, and it's gonna look that certain way, and it's gonna, they're gonna have the speech bubbles or thought bubbles or the little narration boxes or whatever. I don't think that was really necessary, and they didn't do that. They went far enough to where it definitely evokes that, not only with the style of the illustrations themselves, but they've also got this kind of web aesthetic, which also gives it that kind of separation look of, like comic book panels, just a little bit. It's visually interesting, and also, of course, more importantly, it refreshes you on the first movie in case you hadn't seen it in a while, or your memory's a little fuzzy. Like, okay, it recaps things very well. Now, I just have to say up front, I love this movie. That's why I was doing it. And I love Sam Raimi in general. He's probably my favorite filmmaker. But I love his Spider-Man movies. And I think Spider-Man 2 is probably it's still a contender for my absolute favorite for my favorite superhero movie. It's way up there for me. And I love it. So I just wanted to talk about what makes it so great, in my opinion. And even though so many people have already talked about, there's been a lot of talk about these movies online, a lot of it positive, some of it less than super positive, and but a lot of people sort of come around on these movies and see them as, the well-made movies that they are for the most part. Third one having the problems that it has notwithstanding, although I certainly think it's a lot better than a lot of people think it is. A lot of people think it's only, sort of ironically good or whatever. I think well, I'll probably touch upon what I think of the other Spider-Man movies throughout this, and probably Sam Raimi in general. Now, there are a few videos online of the many, many videos sort of made about these movies in general that I wanted to shout out that I really love. And one of them is from a YouTuber called Masako X, I think. And he did a really great video on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy that I love. And especially Patrick Willems. He did a couple videos. He did a video on Sam Raimi in general and like horror comedy and how Sam Raimi does tone in horror comedy. And he also did one for the sincerity. I think it was called The Regular People of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Love that video, and I highly recommend it. And I agree with basically everything he says in it. And also did a really great video on Sam Raimi's work on the movie The Hudsucker Proxy, directed by the Coen brothers. Check that out. But he talks about a whole bunch of stuff like characters like Mr. Aziz here, who are super memorable and everyone loves him. And he has this famous goal that everyone loves because it's memorable. It's just a little bit that everyone remembers. And the camera work during that was very, it has that bustling city feel. It's all handheld and it gives that liveliness to it. And he kind of goes into stuff like that. I'll probably touch on that stuff, but there's also stuff that so many people have already said that probably doesn't need repeated a whole lot. It's like I'm probably not going to go into the details of Spider-Man 3 because so many people already have about the good and bad, but I'll probably just go over my general thoughts on that kind of stuff in passing. But I, of course, wanted to do this movie because I think it is a legitimately fantastic movie. Also, a nice little detail is the Emma Rose sign with Mary Jane's face on it was on that bus that almost ran Peter Parker over. It's a nice little touch there. But yeah, this entire opening sequence is great. I mean, it refreshes you and gets you back into the world of the movie in a lighthearted way. We have Spider-Man saving a couple kids here, and we have him, of all things, delivering pizzas. It gets you right in the back into the life of Peter Parker in a very fun, lighthearted way. This guy right here on the balcony is Scott Spiegel, who co-wrote Evil Dead 2, which that alone I think should get him, in the list of most important people who've ever lived. And it was also his idea to make Evil Dead 2 more comedic than the first, more overtly comedic. And so, thankfully for him. But also, he had a cameo in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness as one of the souls of the damned, the lost souls of the damned, or whatever they were called. And when I watched the movie, I noticed the voice. I actually assumed that it was Sam Raimi's voice. It sounded like Sam Raimi's voice because he did a lot of the voices in like Army of Darkness and stuff. The skeleton version of Bad Ash or Evil Ash. Evil Ash is the better name. But anyway, so I just thought it was him. And I was delighted when I saw the end credits. So much of a nerd I am, I had looked at the end credits. I was like, oh, it was Scott Spiegel. It was delightful. I was like, oh, he really keeps his friends in mind, And here we have Zooey Deschanel. And then we have Pizza Time, one of the most acclaimed and memorable lines within 21st century cinema, for good reason. Yeah, people remember lines like that for good reason. And this whole sequence here, I think Tobey Maguire plays the particular aspect of the Peter Parker character very well in this film. Of he gets beaten down a lot by life, and Tobey Maguire has that air to him where he's going to stick through it, through thick and thin, because he knows what the right thing is to do. But he does get fed up with it, as anyone would, the impossible responsibility of being Peter Parker. And little bits like this scene, whoever played Mr. Aziz here, I don't know the actor's name, but he's really good. He plays this scene really well, There's a little bit here where he tears off the thing off his helmet. It's funny, but it's also, a perfect table setter, if you will, for the rest of the movie. It's like, well, this is what he's going to be going through. His whole life is just going to be smack him in the face and whatnot. And we get caught back up with the Bugle, and of course everyone loves J.K. Simmons as JJ for good reason. He's great. But I think everyone's here. I love this Robbie guy and all the actors, of course, Ted Raimi and Elizabeth Banks, and they play off each other so well. That's what really strikes me so much about bits like this in these movies, is how fleshed out these settings and these groups of characters feel, these background characters. And we're all being introduced to them in a very quick, efficient way, because you probably at least kind of remember these characters and you want to see them again. And we also get a sense of how busy Peter Parker's life is and how much he has to rely on giving him pictures of Spider-Man, which JJ will use to sour his name. And when I see these scenes at the Bugle and scenes like this, and the dynamic there of like Robbie's sympathizes with Peter, and he doesn't think Spider-Man's a menace, and with Betty Brant here and Peter, the way they all interact with each other, it feels like I could, like, if I worked at the Daily Bugle, every single day that I worked there, I would always see something interesting. I feel like I could work there and really get used to being in this community. Elizabeth Banks, director of Cocaine Bear, among doing other things that are less notable and important. Anyway, I really shouldn't have acknowledged that movie. It doesn't deserve acknowledgement. Anyway, here we have a famous case of Sam Raimi abusing actors, which I love. Here we have a backpack, which is going to hit him on the head. This one right here. Bam. That is Sam Raimi hitting Tobey Maguire in the face with a backpack. And there's a pretty famous, funny blooper where it gets around his neck. You got to see if you haven't. But yeah, of course, I love that aspect of Sam Raimi. He famously likes to torture actors and stuff. Not in a going too far way, like William Friedkin, like legitimately stop doing that kind of way. More in just a fun way, You hear all those great stories, those hilarious stories, like with Bruce Campbell and the original Evil Dead and the Evil Dead movies in general, of him torturing Bruce Campbell. And it's the original movie, I believe, where the story of, among many other things, the one that always gets me is Bruce Campbell had some sort of scab or scar on his leg, and Sam Raimi kept poking it with a stick. Very funny. But, I think it's a charming, cute aspect of what Sam Raimi incorporates in his movies. But to be honest, I think actors these days, I think we need more of that for them. I want to see Benedict Cumberbatch get a spin kick to the face. I want to see Timothy Chalamet get nailed to the cross. I want Scorsese to give Leonardo DiCaprio a colonic irrigation on set. I'm just kidding. It doesn't have to be Scorsese doing it. Anyway, so here we are reintroduced, I should say, to the characters from the previous movie. This is the exact same set as the first film, by the way, for Aunt May and Uncle Ben's house in that movie. Now it's just Aunt May's house. And here we have Kirsten Dunst, total babe, but also a great actress. She's a very capable actress, and she's shown that in a lot of different movies. And I think she shows that. She gives, a very commendable performance throughout all three of these movies. A lot of people have problems with the way she's written, and I agree that she definitely, there's aspects of how she's written in the movies that I think could be done better. I think overall I like how she's written, generally speaking, in this movie. Probably the best out of all of them, probably. But I like a lot of the ideas they're doing with her character and the third one as well. And here we have James Franco playing Harry Osborn. Not crazy about James Franco in general as an actor, he's very hit and miss, and I think these movies are probably, he got some good performances out of him. It really depends on the movie. Like Oz the Great and Powerful, he's horribly miscast in that. He is not good in that movie at all. He's just a bore, and it's almost funny how bad he is in that. But I really like the way Harry's written in this movie because he's very emotionally volatile, which makes sense considering how he's set up and how he's upset about the death of his father, and he's upset at Spider-Man, and it's causing a real strain on the relationship. This is the dark sort of middle period where things start to take a turn for the worse for him and his relationship with him and Peter. Also, nice touch. I love the happy birthday, happy balloons imagery behind the characters here in this. They're having this serious conversation. It's a nice little detail. But I think overall the relationship and Harry's sort of 3-movie-long arc, so to speak, is generally speaking paced out pretty well, regardless of some of the issues pacing-wise that the third movie has with his character arc. Regardless of how that's handled, although it's handled better than some people would say, I think, but still not perfectly. I buy the relationship in the first one of being sort of chummy high school friends, but there's some tension there. They're starting to go their separate ways, and I think it's well paced throughout the 3 movies. Here we have Rosemary Harris, total babe, and that was stupid. That was stupid. I'm sorry. No. Seriously, Rosemary Harris, a really good actress, and I think she did a fantastic job as Aunt May in these movies. I mean, she's the spitting image of her, but also, just the character. And I love the way that she's written in these movies. In this movie in particular, I think she's just so well written. And I think she really seemed to understand the nuance of the character. We'll get to that as she gives that great speech towards the end. And you can tell she's a fantastic actor. She's obviously, she's been in a lot of stuff. She acted alongside Sir Laurence Olivier. She's a fantastic actress. She really knows what she's doing. And I think when people sort of remember the goofy performances from like the extras in these movies or some of the out of context goofy stuff that happens, especially in the third movie, people remember these movies as just like, oh, these movies have a lot of dumb, bad acting. And people remember them as just dumb and corny and dumb, goofy in general, which they have those ridiculous elements in them, but it's a real testament to how good a lot of these performances and how well written these characters are in a lot of places. When you have a scene like this, and just scenes like this in general, and performances like Rosemary Harris's or Alfred Molina's performance is fantastic in this film, and there's a lot of nuance to his character, and Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst and J.K. Simmons and all these people giving very different kinds of performances, but they're all really good. And a lot of people just kind of write off a lot of stuff like that in these movies, which I'm not a huge fan of doing that, but this is just my opinion. You're allowed to be wrong about these movies. Anyway, but this is, of course, a nice parallel to a scene from the first movie. It's the same location and everything, and they're separated by the fence, but now they're in different places in their lives. They're a bit more mature. it seems in these movies, the impression I get, and I'm not sure how intentional it is exactly, probably, yeah, probably pretty intentional, I think, is especially the way Tobey Maguire plays it, is Peter can't seem to mask his internal emotional turmoil very well, which I like. And it's, of course, it's ironic because he wears a mask and he's Spider-Man and he has to mask his stuff. But I like that because it works for comedy. It works in a comedic sense with a character like JJ, where he ignores him a lot. So if Peter's being obviously suspicious, he gets all these incredible pictures of Spider-Man, and J.K. Simmons, I keep trying to say, but JJ is like, "Where were you, Parker?" He's like, "Well, and he's being very, it's very obvious, right, that there's something suspicious about him, but of course he's the kind of character that JJ is. It's like, whatever, just give me the pictures. It works in a comedic sense like that, but I also like the sort of tenderness that it gives with moments like Harry and MJ. Harry, a more aggressive, volatile character at this point. Him being more vulnerable and harder to mask his emotion makes things a bit more tense and whatnot. And a character like MJ, it makes these tender moments between them, especially since she's seeing someone else at this moment. It makes it some tension in that regard, too. I think it works rather well. Like here, he's the way he plays it, he's not extremely good at. And I think I totally see that MJ, Kirsten Dunst's performance, like MJ clearly sees to that as well. I would probably say, in my personal opinion, I think this still possibly captures the struggle of Peter's normal life the best of any movie, in my opinion. But there's definitely some movies that have done an incredibly good job as well. I still think this movie probably gets the essence of that aspect of the Peter Parker Spider-Man character more so than any of them other ones do, even though they also get very close and get a lot right. Of course, everyone loves Mr. Ditkovich, again, one of these many side characters that are just so incredibly memorable. And of course, the name Ditkovich is depending on your knowledge of comic books or whatnot. I'm actually not a comic book expert by any means. I haven't read that many Spider-Man comics, but I know a lot of the big stories and big moments and whatnot. I'm not a complete buffoon when it comes to knowing that stuff, but I'm definitely not a comic expert. If you ask me what happened in issue 203, I wouldn't have any idea. So don't come after me with pitchforks for that, or do. I don't care. But I love the Spider-Man character in these movies, watching these movies over and over again religiously as a kid. All three of them really informed that. And then I got into the 90s cartoon, which maybe hasn't aged perfectly in a lot of ways, but it was good enough for me at the time, and getting into the other stuff. And there's been a lot of other Spider-Man cartoons which are really good. A lot of them are, from what I understand. And a lot of the Spider-Man movies have been really quality. I like whether you call it symmetry or contrast, whatever you want to call it, in this scene, where, of course, at first, Mr. Ditkovich closed the door on Peter. But now, he asks him about rent, and Peter closes the door on him. It's cute. Little details there are all over this movie. Here we have Alfred Molina, just a fantastic actor, and he gives a wonderful performance in this movie. This was, I remember, one of the first times people really talked about a great sympathetic villain in a superhero movie. In fact, in general, this movie sort of made waves when it came out about being a superhero movie that was just really good and well written. And I guess a lot of people forgot about that and just said, "Oh, these movies are all dumb," or whatever. And a lot of people would say that this movie has been outclassed or whatever by certain movies. And in terms of the landscape of superhero movies is very different. In fact, it's been overcrowded. It's very much like the Western craze at a certain point. We're for a lot of us, I think we're just sick of seeing superhero movies over and over again. But a lot of people aren't. And I mean, I still love Spider-Man and stuff. And I remember when I saw Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I was already kind of, I didn't really feel like seeing any more MCU movies, but I wanted to see it just because Sam Raimi made it. And I wouldn't have changed my mind. It was fun seeing a Sam Raimi movie again in the theater. And this scene coming up, it's a nice. They really do a good job of making him Otto Octavius sympathetic. He's very different from how he is in the comics, from what I understand. In the comics, he's a bunch of crazy stuff's happened. He almost married Aunt May and all this other stuff, but he's different from the comics. But he's a fleshed out character in the comics as well. He's pretty different here, but they do such a good job of setting up the dynamic here. And the relationship between them is clearly they're going for a family dynamic that Peter can't exactly have, that he desperately wants to have, that's stripped away from him. And they could have been like, regular good friends, and Ben almost had a family, familiar, whatever the word is, a family relationship with Otto and Rosie here. I also love, I don't know where I heard about this, but Otto mentions here that Rosie is like, Rosie tries to get me to read T.S. Eliot, and I still don't understand it. There's a nice, subtle, poetic kind of symbolism there, because there's a famous, I don't know how famous it is, but there's a T.S. Eliot excerpt from something where he talks about clawing at the bottom of the sea, something along those lines, which obviously there's a pretty big similarity with that and how Otto meets his demise at the end of this. Clever stuff. You don't have to know about that in order for the movie to dramatically work. It's just a little nerdy thing. I don't even know how. I'm not going to take credit for finding out about that. I heard about it somewhere else, but that's a nice little writing detail. There's a lot of really clever writing in this movie, and this movie's script went through lots of big movies go through lots of script changes. That's nothing new. It's certainly not unique to this film. But originally, and this laundromat scene's great. There's so many little tiny scenes. They definitely did a good job of coming up with lots of little bits like this, of him trying to pick between his suit and his Spider-Man suit and trying to, go into the laundromat and stuff. They definitely came up with like lots of little vignettes and pieces of, he's regular Spider-Man now and he has to balance that with his real life, his regular life. The logistics of being a superhero, so to speak, especially one like Spider-Man, who he doesn't have a big lair or anything. He's just DIY, But the first movie was written by David Koepp, and David Koepp's written for some really good big hit movies, but also some not very good big blockbuster movies. The quality of his work's a bit hit and miss. And I think he worked on writing writing a script for this movie, but he's not credited as a story by guy in this or anything. He's not credited, I don't believe. There were 3 story by guys, and then Sam Raimi and Alvin Sargent kind of facilitated the final script. And the two of them were the Smallville guys, which I've never watched Smallville, but I've heard enough people complain about Smallville that I think I understand. Like, I don't know, they don't seem like the most consistently solid writers to me. And the third guy was he's written some stuff, but I know that he's written for some of the more recent Star Trek stuff, in particular Star Trek Picard. Oof. And it's like the first 2 seasons of Star Trek Picard, apparently. I never watched the 3rd season, but apparently it gets a little better. But you just wrote a lot of the really bad stuff. So he doesn't strike me as like the world's greatest writer. And if you read the other iterations of the script they had, you can see like it's very weird. And they had lots of different weird plot elements. Like they were going to have Doc Ock be a lot younger, and he was going to have a relationship with Mary Jane, and he had to have these like endorphins or something injected in him in order to withstand the pain. He had there was some sort of like drug addiction metaphor with him. There were some weird elements that and Sam Raimi went through all those, and he's like, well, I like this idea, I like that idea, don't like a whole bunch of these ideas. So he just, cherry picked the stuff that worked. And then he and Alvin Sargent got together and worked on the screenplay. And Alvin Sargent is a 2-time Academy Award winner for Best Adapted Screenplay. And I think it shows he's a really good writer. And a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the thematic character work and stuff is really solid in this movie. Love this little bit here of the reveal of him webbing up the car. This whole action scene is actually pretty short. And that's what strikes me about this, going back to movies like this, is compared to nowadays. Maybe it's just, I don't know what it is, if it's true or not. I'm pretty sure that it just feels like action scenes like this are so much shorter in movies like this. Love that. Nice little detail there. It's a very Spider-Man thing for him going through the truck. I love the lighting of these scenes as well. There's a later swinging scene where the lighting's just great. There's so many shadows and alongside the buildings, but the light coming from down the street illuminates it in this really great way. And the framing of these shots here is just so great. Him standing on the hood of the car and them hanging there. I do think about it because Peter Parker drives the car up, to the side there, up to the curb. I imagine him changing out of his Spider-Man costume while he's driving. It's a pretty funny mental image. And I love this line here. Hey, you can't park there. If you park there, I'm towing it. Whatever. It's a funny line, and Tobey Maguire delivers it very well. Lots of little fun moments. All right, this is my biggest complaint with this movie. My biggest, boldest, big old complaint with this movie. Of the 3 Sam Raimi movies, this is my least favorite Bruce Campbell cameo. It's still good. It's still good. It's still funny. But yeah, I think the other two are. I love in the first one, he gives Spider-Man his name, which is funny. And Bruce Campbell could have been like a wrestling announcer if he wanted to. He also could have been a TV, like a game show host. He has that kind of personality. And he's just so funny. He's Bruce Campbell, just one of the all-time great people. Can't go wrong. He's really funny in the third one as the French waiter, who is obviously not French. He's really funny there. But and then there is good. Nice little inclusion of the 60s Spider-Man theme in a funny little way. But yeah, I think Sam Raimi deserves a lot of credit and Alvin Sargent for working together and making the script for this movie as good as it was. Because Sam Raimi really worked hard to get the story right. And Alvin Sargent, I don't know how much Alvin Sargent changed the overall story, but you can tell a really skilled and really smart writer with lots of experience under his belt did a lot of the work here. A lot of the dialogue, a lot of the dramatic scenes is very good, and that's part of what makes this movie work so well, is that the dramatic character stuff is really good, and it's taken really seriously. I also love here the visual symmetry here. The cars passing by there mirrors the famous shot where he takes a bite out of the hot dog during the raindrops keep falling on my head montage, but the cars are going in the opposite direction. They're going up the street rather than down the street. And by the way, that is, for any of you who don't know, that's a vegan hot dog that he takes a bite into because Tobey Maguire was I don't know if he's a vegan or a vegetarian, but one or the other. So that's a vegan hot dog he bites into. That shot also reminds me of him running down the street after Uncle Ben gets killed in the first one. And that shot ascending that building just looks so great. I just love the way that the city is illuminated in these shots here. It's very atmospheric and cool. And then this little surprise for when you're watching this movie for the first time if his webs just stop working. That's a little surprise. Also, it's funny that he just takes this big fall. It makes sense. He's Spider-Man. Spider-Man's, I would say a lot of people don't know, but I think most people do know, like Spider-Man's surprisingly strong, but almost to a point where everyone knows that at this point is not even that surprising, really. That hotel behind Peter Parker's head there, you'll see it in this reverse shot. The hotel behind his head is the hotel that Sam Raimi actually stayed at while they made this movie. They mentioned that in the commentary track. One of those windows around there behind his head that's like illuminated a little bit was actually Sam Raimi's room. It's cute. I don't know the name of this comedian. He was an improv comedian. I think maybe he was pretty popular at the time. I don't know his name. But this scene's pretty funny. I like how understated it is. They don't go on too long. Unlike the extended cut. There is an extended cut of this film called Spider-Man 2.1. It's 8 minutes longer, I want to say. Somewhere around there. It's like 8-ish minutes longer. And I've never seen the entire cut front to back, but I've seen pretty much all I've seen pretty much all of the extra deleted material, and I prefer the theatrical cuts pretty vastly. All the deleted material. It's fun to see that stuff. Don't get me wrong. I don't have a problem with seeing that stuff, but I think all of the stuff that got deleted. I'm like, yep, that makes sense why that was deleted for pacing and for tone issues and stuff. And there's the funny bit. The one thing that I do think is really nice is like a lot of the action scenes just kind of get dragged on, which I feel like, again, if this was an action movie, if this was a movie now, so much money gets pumped into these movies that it's like every dollar they spend on the action scene, we got to keep it all. Audiences want more action. I think that's part of the reason why action scenes in these days feel like they're just so long. And we'll see that with the action scenes later on in this movie. We already saw with a couple that there were. But yeah, there's a funny bit where JJ puts on Spider-Man's costume and stuff. It's funny, but the effects with him his head being put on the costume look really bad. It's whatever. They cut it for a good reason, It's fun. I think I'm glad that we have all that stuff, but I'm also glad that it wasn't in the cut because it just works better for the whole movie. I like the way that MJ is written for a lot of this. This is where MJ really starts to feel like Mary Jane, like her character. She pushes back against Peter, and she really has a lot of self-respect for herself and self-respect for herself too. But you understand her frustration with him, but at the same time, it's you sympathize with Peter because obviously we know he's Spider-Man, and the frustration of him trying to tell her, I buy it all personally. Some of the stuff in the third one with their relationship, I like a lot of the ideas, again, of them having some problems with their relationship. Like, that makes perfect sense. It's just some of the aspects of how it was integrated in the whole story overall. Yeah, little issues here and there, but people talked about Spider-Man 3. So, and I love this whole bit here of him pouring his heart out to no one, just talking to Spider-Man. It's a nice little scene. And you really buy it. You really sympathize with him and his frustrations. Mentioning the editing, though, I just wanted to shout out Bob Murawski's editing throughout these movies is just great. Bob Murawski is Sam Raimi's editing partner, longtime editing partner for several of his works, and they just go together like bread and butter. Sam Raimi's his directing style needs to be edited in a very specific way, and I think Bob Murawski does such a great job, and I imagine Sam Raimi is heavily involved in the editing process. And you can really tell because that's part of what makes his vision work so well. And there's so many great moments throughout these movies of just great little editing, not just the shots, but I remember in the third one, for example, some might say the editing in that one's a little problematic, but that's more the story inherently has some problems because of pacing issues and stuff because they had too much stuff, more stuff than they were planning on having originally. I'll get to the third one. I'll mention it. I'll mention what I feel about the movies. But during the Sandman fight, the first time Spider-Man fights the Sandman inside that like truck, at the end of the action scene after Sandman escapes and whatever, Spider-Man goes up to the top of the building and there's this little comedy beat where he's pouring the sand out of his costume and he's like, where do all these guys come from? And he's pouring the sand out of the boot of his costume and stuff. And right before, it's like a wide shot of him sitting there pouring the stuff out. And right before they cut to the next scene, like a movie, your average normal movie probably would, there's a little fraction of a second long shot of Peter spitting some sand out of his mouth. And then it cuts to the next scene. Little tiny touches like that really add up and really matter. And they add all sorts of little charm to the pacing and really work. Again, having all these little desperate elements of this sort of big dramatic moment that we're seeing right here. I know some people might say, and I do somewhat agree, I think it works for the style of Doc Ock they're going for. I think it's a little weird that he has little pins that stick into his spine and attach it to him. Like, can he surgically, the surgeons try to remove it, but was he planning on just having, like, how would the removal of these arms have gone? If the whole thing went according to plan, would he just be stuck with them? Probably not. I don't know. Anyway, The effects for these arms, though, are really good. It's a really impressive combination. John Dykstra and his team, I believe, worked very hard on combining puppetry with CGI at the time, very state of the art CGI. Even today, I think a lot of it holds up very well because of the direction and again just the effects work in general. And I love the design for the arms too. It's very modern, but it's also they oddly they get a lot of mileage in terms of character and visual storytelling. little touches like how they later on when the arms literally start to talk with him, like their claws move in a way that makes it look like they have little mouths and their mouths are flapping. That kind of stuff works, I think, with Sam Raimi's sense of tone. I love Sam Raimi's visual style so much. I mean, I could totally geek out throughout this and talk about every snap zoom and weird Dutch angle and stuff. And maybe I will indulge in some places, but I love Sam Raimi's style and all throughout his stuff. And I think it serves the movie, and we're going to get to the hospital scene shortly, and I have, something to say about that. But to me, even more so than his visual style, which I love, to me, the trademark above all else of Sam Raimi as a storyteller and as a filmmaker is his ability to jump back and forth tonally. I think his balance of tone is just incredible because a lot of people write these movies off as just silly and dumb, and maybe they write all the movies he's ever made as silly and dumb. Well, first of all, you need to watch A Simple Plan, like right now. If you haven't seen it at all, you just need to watch that movie. But he balances the character stuff with these goofy elements in such a way because those moments work. It's all spread out and paced in a very specific way. And he just understands how to do that in a way that I buy. A lot of people, I think in today's internet culture especially, it's easier to watch clips and out of context scenes of stuff and just trust me, when you're watching the movie in Sam Raimi's case, I think you're way more likely to buy the scenes. They might seem weird and goofy out of context, but so do most things in movies. That's why context is important. But yeah, I think people like Pat Willems, like I said before, he touches upon that in this movie. Sam Raimi is a very old school entertainer type of guy. You see interviews with him and he has that sense of whenever he makes a movie, he wants to just excite you. He's like, step right up, ladies and gentlemen, watch my latest picture. He has that vibe. And he's talked about, he always seemed to want to make the ultimate entertainment picture. Like the all-in-one. He wants to make a movie that'll make you cheer, a movie that'll scare you, a movie that'll excite you, a movie that'll make you laugh and cry. He wants you to feel everything that you can feel while making a movie. He loves entertaining an audience and just through any and all means. And you really see that. He tries it in a lot of his movies, whether it's something like Crime Wave, which is absolutely... speaking of Sam Raimi-isms, that shot of that eye. Pretty brutal demise for Rosie there. But they don't show too much, which is good. That's, little element there of like, ooh, that's a little shocking, but it doesn't go too far, again, which I'll say about the hospital scene in a minute. But yeah, he's always seems to be trying to make these all-in-one entertainment pictures. And I would argue that Spider-Man 2 is probably the closest he ever successfully got to doing that. Evil Dead 2 might be the most entertaining movie ever made, but it's not exactly for everyone. Everyone, I think, should be able to acknowledge the craft and the amazing ability behind that movie. But, it's not going to appeal to the general mass audiences the way that a movie like this would. I think this is the closest he ever successfully got to that. Spider-Man 3 also could have been on the same level, but there was some interference there. But he definitely tried to. And there's honestly a lot of similarities between Spider-Man 3 and like Crime Wave. Man, Rosie's looking pretty good considering she got sliced up. I always thought that. She barely has a scratch. And I'm not asking that she has a whole bunch of, brutal stuff, like a bunch of gore and everything. Speaking of which, I just thought that was funny. But speaking of which, this hospital scene, everyone talks about it, and it's great. I love it for all the same reasons you love it. I love It's super Evil Dead. Every single shot's just so cool, and it's so scary in a cool way. Everyone's talked about that, and I could talk about, things like how John Landis has a cameo as a nameless doctor, just like how he does in Darkman. But what I want to focus on is how legitimately great this scene actually is. A lot of people, because some people have the opinion, like this little bit here, I love a little moment of tension there. Very unique and interesting. And the image of the arm coming into the goggles there, right? I'm waiting for it right there. Anyway, but I think the scene, some people say the scene goes too far. I think this scene definitely could have gone too far. This scene could have been self-indulgent, and ill-fitting for a Spider-Man movie. If there was any gore, in the scene, that would be a bad thing. Like, I wouldn't care, like, oh, it's like Evil Dead. Like, that's going too far. It doesn't fit the movie. But, like, all this stuff, it is pretty horrific and stuff, especially when you're a kid, dude. I mean, now, of course, I know about Evil. This scene doesn't scare me. That shot's great of him being unconscious there. Like, that shot, everyone remembers that. It's scary when you're a little kid and stuff. At least it was for me. I was a little scared by it, but I wasn't too frightened to it. I was still willing to watch the movie, And to me, this scene fits this moment in the story, This scene fits. It's a bit of a jolt, and it should be. It's a sad, scary thing that's happening to our sympathetic character. It's a real turning point in the plot. I don't think it goes too far. I think it stops just short of going too far. And I think that's a very hard thing to do, but of course Sam Raimi knows how to, because he's just that good of a storyteller. I also think there's an interesting visual metaphor going on here, which parallels Peter's arc in this movie, which I will touch upon. But there's an interesting visual metaphor, and I love the shot coming up here where the light behind him the arms reach up and cry out. It's very like over the top, big, bold visual storytelling. And it works again so well. It's so visually pleasing, and it fits with the over-the-top tone of the movie that the movie set up. But again, emotionally and character-wise, it works consistently well. And Alfred Molina's performance here is so great. He looks so confused and scared. And I think that there's a visual metaphor going on here with it's symbolizing the rebirth of Otto Octavius into a villain, into Doc Ock. We're in a hospital. He was in an operating room, so you could say it's, like a woman giving birth in a hospital, and that shot's so awesome. It's just so many awesome shots, straight out of a comic book panel, but in a way that works, not like a Joel Schumacher going too deep into, it's a comic book, blah, 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 in a way that really works. But the visual metaphor kind of going on there with Otto Octavius's rebirth and the way that the arms kind of carry him around and they almost cradle him like a mother cradling a newborn kid, a newborn child, a newborn kid, a newborn, baby. There's an interesting visual metaphor there, and I think it contrasts Peter's, because Peter's, as we'll be seeing later, some people might scoff at this, some people might have said this ironically or sarcastically, but Peter's, his arc of his powers not working, in particular his inability to shoot webs. Some people might say that's a metaphor for impotence, and just saying that some people might scoff at that, and it's done in a subtle way. If they don't make any sort of dumb joke about it in this movie, it's a very subtly background thing, and that visual metaphor is a very mature one. It's like the complete opposite of the metaphor of a newborn baby, which is an interesting contrast between the two characters and where their arcs go. I love what JJ says, my son, the astronaut. He just casually introduces that. Of course he does. Of course, we have one of the most famous scenes in cinematic history once again. It's just great. And I love the watery transition coming up here. But I also love what makes him laugh that hard is just Peter asking if he can get paid. Pay in advance, but still, he's just asking a pretty simple thing. And JJ is just such a jerk that he gives this over-the-top laugh that everyone remembers just because an employee of his asked if he could get paid in advance. It's pretty funny. But again, we go from a funny scene like that, it's just a quick little thing, and go back to this, and it works because we're in my opinion it works. I don't even know why. I'm always amazed. And again, if I don't think it's my bias for my nostalgia for this movie or my love of Sam Raimi showing. Because I can be pretty objective, I like to think. And for me, just watching the movie, all these different tonal sequences just work together in tandem so well. And I think so many superhero movies, especially the MCU, found a successful formula where they sort of laugh at themselves. They take themselves seriously up to a point, and then they sort of laugh at themselves. And they sort of rode that formula for a while. And they still do, I guess, to an extent. I don't know. I haven't watched a new MCU movie in a little while, but they ride that formula, and it works, or at least it did work. Maybe they've sort of ridden it out a little too long, but this movie doesn't really do that. It doesn't exactly laugh at itself. It's just very earnest, and I like that. I appreciate that. And Sam Raimi knows how to commit to that in the most over the top way, in a way but he still keeps the character stuff in mind. Like this scene, I love. This is where he really takes a turn into becoming a villain, but he's still very sympathetic. And we see that his inhibitions are taken away, and he's smart enough to know what's going on. He knows that his inhibitor chip has been broken, and he knows he's smart enough to know what's going on, but he still has an ego to him, and he as a person, it really shows the depths of like any person, he really needs to keep his ego and his bad thoughts under control at all times, and they're constantly sort of eating away at him. And when that's taken away, he just goes that little bit of an edge further. This bank scene's great. I forget the name of this guy, but he's been in stuff. He's been in stuff that I've watched and stuff. I just don't remember his name. But yeah, pretty funny, this whole sequence. But it's a nice mixture of comedy with drama, and it's very sad. The situation that May and Peter are in is just another facet of how Peter's life is taking a downward turn, and that I think that's just something that this movie does so well, and it's why I still say that it arguably gets that aspect of the Peter Parker character down the best, with all the personal drama conflicting with his personal life and his superhero life coming at odds. Is he already has so much stuff going on in his life, and partway through the movie, you really feel him getting beat down. You really feel for him. I just noticed now that guy has a little limp, as he's walking away because Aunt May kicked him in the. I just noticed that. I love noticing little stuff like that. I will say that visual effect of the safe getting torn off is not great. Well, at least it hasn't aged super well. It never bothered me before, but like looking at it again, it's a little hokey looking. But I love the reveal of him, and he looks really cool with that hat on, I gotta say. Yeah, it's a small thing. Janky effects here and there. I think the effects in this movie overall have held up really well, and I think a lot of it's the direction and whatnot. I think the action scenes in all three of the Sam Raimi movies, I don't know if this is kind of a somewhat hot take or whatever, but I think they're all great for the most part. Like, I think the third movie has some overall really great action sequences. And I think a lot of people don't sort of think that way. They think the effects are a little too janky and haven't aged well at all. And in a lot of spaces, yeah, they look dated, of course, but I think the storyboarding for the action scenes in that movie are great. I love all the Sandman action, and the fight between Harry and Peter at the beginning is really good, and the sort of fist fight between them later on. Some of the effects, they're almost a little too ambitious. Like the effects, they couldn't quite do it yet, or they seem a little rushed in some places. But I think it's just a little ambitious for their own good. But I think the staging of the action is still really good. In this movie, the effects hold up pretty darn well, and of course all the, like him getting thrown out into that taxi out there, they really take advantage of Doc Ock's multiple arms. And I remember being a kid and just watching these action sequences over and over again and noticing so many details. I think these movies in general really gave me an appreciation for movies. This shot here, if you rewatch that shot of Aunt May getting picked up, that's a pretty hokey looking effect, because it's very weird. If you slow it down and rewatch it frame by frame, it's like one of the arms reaches out for her, and only you can only see one, but there's another one that's already wrapped around her before the arm even has a chance to get to her. It's very weird looking. I love this. Woman screaming. Sam Raimi has lots of women screaming in his movies and stuff, and it's a very, I don't know. I dig it. It's it could be annoying. Like if there was a main character who screamed a lot, like it's, there's I don't think he ever really gets annoying with it. I think it's just something that he likes to do, and it works. That is also, Aunt May getting thrown up there, and there's Stan Lee. Remember when those were Stan Lee's cameos? Of course, now we unfortunately don't have Stan Lee cameos anymore. Oh, now I'm sad. I'm really sad now. Rest in peace, Stan Lee. But remember when his cameos were just blink and you'll miss it? The first Stan Lee cameo I remember seeing that really made an impression on me was in Spider-Man 3. Honestly, that's still probably my favorite Stan Lee cameo. Who says enough said? I guess one person can make a difference. But, of course, the MCU Stan Lee cameos are great. It's very funny, and the reveal that they're all the same person or whatever. It's very funny. They do lots of fun stuff with it. But this fight alongside the building doesn't get talked about as much as the train fight. At least I don't think it does. But this is really great. I think all the action scenes in this movie are pretty awesome. And again, like I said, for a modern movie standards, they're pretty short. They're pretty, everything just seems like it needs to be bigger. Bigger is better. And I think the right amount is just better. And I think all the action scenes, like the train fight, well, we'll get to that later, but it's not as long as I remember it being, It's like the perfect length, I think. And you gotta love this little moment here. I love Aunt May hitting him. It's nice. And it also, when Mary Jane tries to hit him later on in the film, it's a nice little subversion. And they do a good job of, a lot of people complain about that. They're like, oh, Mary Jane is annoying because she tries to help out and it doesn't work. I'm like, well, yeah, it would have made Doc Ock look a little bit, lame if, if he gets hit in the back twice, the same thing works twice. It would have, I think it's a nice little subversion. I do think this line here at the end is funny. We sure showed him. What do you mean we? I still kind of don't get. I still kind of don't get it. I think the implication is that he's acting like they know each other, but of course they don't. He forgets that he's not supposed to let her know that he's Peter Parker at that point. Nice little moment. I also there's some differences in a lot of other versions. Aunt May does not like Spider-Man. And generally speaking, I don't remember if she really changes her mind about Spider-Man at some point. But she understands and respects Spider-Man throughout pretty much all three movies. Maybe in the first movie, she oh, that's Spider-Man, he's a menace. But she doesn't really do that. And I like that interpretation. I also like it when she, I like when she flip-flops back and forth between liking him and not liking him. I like that too. But I like that, she's sort of the glowing beacon of, she understands what Spider-Man should do better than Peter does a lot of the time, which we see later on with that great speech she gives. This whole scene there has a lot of comedy in it, like the running gag of him trying to get stuff from the trays is great. But the stuff with JJ here is great. But a lot of the drama here is also really good. Like he tries to talk to MJ and him and Harry is when you really start to feel like his life, and then the sequence afterward with his powers going away, kind of it all starts to add up on him, and you really start to feel it pile up on him personally and emotionally. This character, John Jameson, it's a bit of a shame because a bit of a Jameson. Yeah, that was dumb. It's a bit of a shame that I don't know about if the actor. I don't know why. Well, I guess it just didn't work with the script that they were developing for the third one after they had to put Venom in it and stuff. What a missed opportunity! They could have had him become Venom or whatever. They could have had him. They didn't even have to necessarily do that. I think it would have totally worked because his motivation was there and everything. You know, Peter stole his woman and everything. So it's like they had the T-ball set up. It was so weird, but they didn't take advantage of that, or at least have him. They set up he's an astronaut and everything. So have him take the symbiote back from outer space or something. That would have been better than just having the symbiote crash land. There was a disturbance. He keeps using that word, disturbance. It's really funny because he can't tell them what it is, of course. I like that MJ pushes back in this portion of the movie and later on, but she's completely unimpressed with what Peter's doing here, as she should be. The movie doesn't pretend like that's, sufficient. It's almost like, I like that Peter doesn't really, him reading poetry doesn't work out for him really, because he doesn't exactly internalize it. He just sort of recites it. Maybe he kind of understands the beauty of it, but he doesn't really internalize the meaning. And of course, Doc Ock, with that T.S. Eliot parallel, sort of has to, unintentionally or otherwise, he unfortunately has to internalize the message of that T.S. Eliot bit with his demise at the end of the movie. It's where you really start to feel Peter getting the stuff piled upon him, while still leaving some room for levity like that. And the emotional outburst here from Harry, all sorts of really starts to add up. I guess sporadically I'll touch upon what I think of all the other Spider-Man movies, or maybe I'll touch upon Sam Raimi's other movies more so than I already am now. But so the other Sam, I love this movie. It's it's a 10 out of 10 for me. I love this movie. Like my personal favorite Spider-Man movie. Whether or not it's objectively the best, I'm not sure I can say, but it's one of my absolute favorites, if not my absolute favorite superhero movie. It's way up there for me. The first Sam Raimi Spider-Man, I also love it. It's great. This movie definitely improves upon it, and there's it's some of the dialogue here and there. It's a little rough around the edges. It's got some problems, but overall, I still think it's a great movie. And I don't even think the effects in the first one look as bad as a lot of people say. Honestly, I think the effects in the first one look mostly fine. Maybe if I rewatch it, I haven't seen it. I've only seen it in HD like once, so maybe, and that was a little while ago. But I've seen all these movies like 100 times, like I said before. But I like to think I'm pretty objective. I love the lighting here, great shot. But I think overall, just that movie, I still love it. I still think it's a lot of fun, and it's a great origin story it's a great portrayal of the origin for Spider-Man and all that. This alleyway, by the way, and I was blown away when I was like, oh my God, of course it is the exact same alley used in Darkman, when Liam Neeson first escapes the hospital, and it's like the exact same framing of the shot. I think there's a little storm drain on the left side of the frame, and the dumpster on the right side. It's like the same framing and stuff, and it looks great. Oh man, that movie's so great. Darkman's great if you haven't seen it. And of course, another parallel with the first movie, trying to climb the walls. They don't try to do the music thing again, which I think that would have been a bit much. This transition is so cool. Every time I watch it, I'm like, man, that is such a cool little transition there. From what I understand, they kind of weren't planning on having that first. They kind of came up with it gradually. But what a great little transition there. It really, and it also adds, it's not superfluous. That's why I think the magic is with Sam Raimi is things like that are not self-serving and just like, ooh, look at me, I have a visual style. They're really creative, but also that's such a great way of him establishing that this is a problem that's eating away at Peter. It's a long term issue that he's having. You know, he goes back home and he's still, I can't read it. And he goes to bed upset, you know, it's really great. And then that continuation of where he is with, you know, him sitting in bed defeated, and now he's sitting on a doctor's, sitting in a doctor's office in just casual wear, and he's confused and stuff. There's another moment where I think it's really funny. The doctor doesn't really seem to catch on to him, but the pretty obvious, in my dream, I'm Spider-Man. And it's not even my dream, it's someone else's dream. They make it look like the doctor's going to catch on to him, but like it doesn't really seem like he does. You're Spider-Man. In my dream. It's not in my dream. It's a friend of mine. That's another thing. It's a nice little comedy, but he kind of, he laughs about it, but he doesn't really seem to. He doesn't also say he was like, well, you're Spider-Man, you know. It's a cute little thing. Is he wearing a Grateful Dead shirt? It's weird. I never noticed that. Maybe he's not. Maybe it's just like a skull shirt. I don't know. It's a little weird. I didn't know a doctor could just like do that. I mean, of course, doctor wear whatever. Maybe the actor was just like, oh, I'm the world's biggest Grateful Dead fan. I'm going to wear this shirt no matter what. The shot here is great. I've never noticed it if they do. I'm pretty sure they do not overlay the Spider-Man, half the Spider-Man mask onto his face here. They don't, as far as I'm aware. It doesn't seem like a little, I think they do in the trailers or something. There's some things there where I could have sworn they did that, but whatever. You don't need it. We've already gotten plenty of imagery like that. It's fine. Would have been a nice little, it's whatever. It's not a huge flaw or anything. We have the late, great Cliff Robertson. What an amazing performance as Uncle Ben in the first one, and it was really cool of him to show up again in this movie. And, well, I guess he does show up in the third one again. That stupid retcon. This scene's great, but I guess I'll touch on Spider-Man 3 now. Spider-Man 3, I like it overall okay. Overall okay. If I just let my bias and nostalgia kick in for these movies, they're all 10 out of 10s in my opinion, but objectively speaking, I could look at Spider-Man 3 objectively and see like, you know, there's a lot of great stuff in Spider-Man 3. There's a lot of great stuff. Lots of great scenes, and people online have, you know, defended that movie, and a lot of people just say, oh, that movie's dumb nonsense and there's nothing good in it, but I enjoy it, you know, sarcastically. I enjoy it ironically, by which they mean sarcastically. But I think there is legitimately a lot to love about it. Quality-wise, that movie's just absolutely all over the place. And it's a shame that, you know, Sam Raimi didn't exactly get to tell the story that he originally wanted to there. But there's still a lot of good stuff in that movie. I can't call it a great movie on the whole. There's greatness in there, but it's bogged down in, you know, lots of other stuff that wasn't meant to be there. And I'm not going to say that it would definitely 100% be a 10 out of 10 masterpiece if they didn't have to put Venom and other elements they didn't want to in there. But, and of course, Spider-Man No More, that imagery is great. And I always love that the eyes linger there. Going right from that into this montage is the funniest thing. I believe the Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head was that was like the temp track, the temporary scoring for the scene, and they were going to figure out later. But then they just decided that's great, and it's perfect. It's so goofy, it's so cheesy, and it's so delightful. But it should be. This is Peter being himself, and he's, you know, just kind of a dork. But it's so delightful, and he's made a mistake, but in the moment, you know, he's kind of bubbly and everything's going great for me. You know, the slow motion shots. This movie's not trying to make you go, we're being serious right now. It's showing you a goofy thing, but it's working towards the overall drama and story of the movie. But in the moment, yeah, it's supposed to be goofy. And I love this entire montage. Also, nice little visual storytelling there of the wheel falling off. The wheels are falling off, so to speak. But and of course, everyone loves it. It's shot so great. Because that's not out of malice. Of course, we see him later on, you know, realize he should probably get back to stopping crimes even without his powers and stuff. But this is sort of the stage, and his character arc has a lot of interesting sort of stages here. And this is the official sort of downturn for him, his downfall. And this freeze frame is just hilarious. Love this whole sequence. Love the whole montage. Spider-Man 3, overall, I can't call it a great movie because it just has too many problems, but I think it has a lot of really good qualities to it that a lot of people ignore or don't really take into account how good a lot of that stuff is. But more recently, more and more people, like I said, the YouTubers I've mentioned have acknowledged a lot of that movie's strengths. So I don't think I have to necessarily make a defense for it, but I love this little moment here, of course, where she notices him and she's taken aback, and then I am glad. And then she says the line, she staggers, and I am glad. It's a nice little dramatic irony. But it's also very funny. And I think the scene works especially well almost immediately. This is the first sort of stage of Peter kind of realizing, oh, maybe something's wrong. It takes a little while. We get several scenes dedicated to showing his arc gradually. Again, very, very solid writing. I totally buy his arc here because, we have the first, I do my homework now. She immediately is like, this doesn't change anything just because I like that writing for her. It's really good. And he's sort of in denial. He's like, well, I want to have my things my way now. And he sort of it starts to dawn on him. It's really good stuff. So those are my general thoughts on the other Sam Raimi movies. Love them all. Love them all, but Spider-Man 3 has problems and whatnot, but I think that's mostly the fault of just the studio and mismanagement. But Sam Raimi is the director. He deserves some blame for that, but still love him and still would watch that movie any day. It's definitely an entertaining movie. But so in terms of the other Spider-Man movies, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, terrible. Again, people have gone on and on, especially about the Amazing Spider-Man 2, talking about how horrible that movie is. And some people say those movies are good, and I think there's a lot of good actors in them. I think a lot of the effects are really good. Some of the effects look a little cheap, but some of the effects in these movies haven't aged that well either, so that's fine. But I think the scripts and the storytelling in those movies are really, really bad. Less so in the first one. The first one, I still don't think the storytelling is great. There's lots of problems in the script of that one, but the second one especially is just horrible. But so I don't like them, and there's great actors in those movies. I mean, friggin' Paul Giamatti. You can't say like, oh, the actors aren't good. You got Paul Giamatti, but his performance is terrible because his character's written horribly and he doesn't know how to act it because probably the direction's not great. And Andrew Garfield, great actor, and he was really good as Spider-Man. He was great in Spider-Man No Way Home because his writing for his character and the direction was just a lot better. Speaking of great actors, we have Brent Briscoe here, who was in A Simple Plan. He gives an amazing performance in that movie. It's nice. It's nice that he's in this movie, as there are some other Sam Raimi people. And a slow moment here. The dialogue that you can pick the daisies off my grave. Just a hilarious dialogue there, but it's overlaid in this really nice contemplative shot of Robbie there looking off in the distance. But yeah, so those movies, I don't want to dwell on them. I don't want to be too negative. And if you like those movies, more power to you, the Amazing Spider-Man movies. But it's just touching on how I feel about those movies in general. I'm not here to be super negative. I'm here to talk about positivity and all that. Things I'm passionate about. And I passionately enjoy this film, and Spider-Man and Sam Raimi and all that. Here we have the continuation of his, and there's lots of fades to black in this movie. Lots of interesting. Sam Raimi has a lot of sort of old school tendencies as a filmmaker and as an editor, and fades to black are sort of a common thing there. They're not like they're not used anymore. Of course they are, but a very old school kind of pacing to it. We have the continuation of Peter's arc here is very. He sort of realizes that he's feeling guilt now. Things are starting to turn for him in his newfound life, and this whole sequence I think is just great. I love how underwritten it. Not underwritten. It's appropriately written, but it's not overwritten. Is probably how I should say it. There's no, she doesn't say anything after Peter explains it. She just, and Rosemary Harris, just her performance is so good, and I love how Peter has to work up the courage to really admit what he says. But of course, it takes May some time to soak that all in. Seeing Rosemary Harris, it also reminds me, I believe the first time her and Sam Raimi worked on anything together was in his 2000 movie, The Gift. And that movie has a really kind of crazy stacked cast as Cate Blanchett and Keanu Reeves, among other people. And Rosemary Harris plays the main character's mother, I want to say. Probably mother, not grandmother. The main character is a psychic. And Rosemary Harris literally just, she's like a vision of the main character's mother or whatever. And she just appears. She just literally just walks out of the woods. And she's like, oh, mother. And this really creepy music plays. And it was shocking. Like all the while, it's this creepy moment. And she never shows up again. She's in the movie for like 30 seconds. And when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, this is Rosemary Harris. It's Aunt May, and she's creepy. She's giving me the willies. I guess let's touch upon the MCU movies, the home movies. Those titles suck. That's my first complaint. But I don't. Does anyone actually like the titles of those movies? Homecoming. I remember when the first one came out. I was like, I loved the movie when I saw it, but I was like, Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming. That's kind of a weird, dumb title, but whatever. And then with the other was Far From Home and No Way Home. I'm like, these titles suck. It's like they're just meant to confuse you. All the posters look the same, so when you boot them up on whatever streaming service or whatever, you're just supposed to get tricked into watching them because they all blend together. So I don't like the titles, but the movies themselves, pretty darn good. Some of them get a little bogged down in having to service the overall MCU, but I think they're quality films, no doubt, and they do definitely get Spider-Man very much. Lots of good performances and lots of great Spider-Man. The action's great. They're very inventive. They take advantage of, the other Marvel characters and stuff. It's a different, unique take on Spider-Man. It's not as definitive one as I know a lot of people would say a movie like this is. I would never pretend that there is, as much as I love these movies, I wouldn't necessarily say that like this is the definitive portrayal of Peter Parker, just like how he is in the comics. I don't think we'll ever get, that kind of universally acceptable. It's like Batman. I'm not sure we'll ever get, a universally acceptable Batman, other than, of course, Kevin Conroy. But that's animated and all that. Rest in peace, Kevin Conroy. But that's animated, and it's just forms of live action film. I love this take on Peter. I love this take on Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and I love the world of these movies and all that. But I'm not going to sit here and say, well, this is the only valid live action version of Peter Parker. I'm not going to say that. Maybe as a joke, but you know what I mean. But yeah, the MCU. This is going to get a little bogged down. I thought Spider-Man No Way Home, of course, I'm the target demographic because I have so much nostalgia and I love the Sam Raimi movie so much. So if anyone should be easily manipulated by that movie, it's me. It was a little cool and a little weird to see Tobey Maguire in a Spider-Man movie in the theater again, but it was felt a little manipulative and a little like I was being pandered to a little bit. But overall, it's a well-written movie. There's some gripes I have with the writing here and there, and it gets a little bogged down in fan service and stuff. And some of the villains are just clearly better than others. But I'm not here to complain about any of the movies in particular. I'm just here to give my overall thoughts. And yeah, I think those MCU Spider-Man movies are very good. they're very, very good. And I think Tom Holland's great, and them in lots of great performances. So they're not they're very good movies. Sam Raimi is very good at deciding when to not have music. There's no music during this, which of course there is ones that, we have the quiet build up here. I remember in the climax of the first one, the final fight in that old building between Spider-Man and Green Goblin, there's no music there for the most part. And it just adds to the intensity and the rawness of it. He's very good at deciding that. That shot, of course, is hilarious because the shot itself is good, but there's very famously a bunch of bloopers of the puppeteer trying to give him that drink, but he can't drink. Alfred Molina can't drink from it because the puppeteer keeps like shoving the glass in his face. Pretty funny. Alfred Molina officially seems very. I love he seems very. Again, kind of like Peter. We've seen his transformation, but he's totally evil and deranged by this point. You really see the compassion's been sucked out from his eyes. He's reached a similar low point, a different, very different low point than Peter has reached. I also like that it's a nice. It really ratchets up the tension there, where Harry has second thoughts, where he says, don't hurt Peter, but he's a little too late. Much like how Doc himself is a little too late when he redeems himself at the end, but he sacrifices himself. He has to die because narratively that's what's led him to that point. He's a little too late. It's a tragic thing, but and this scene's great. It's a big step up in his arc. He's at the point where he feels like, well, I have to do something. I have to try to help someone, even though now I love this shot, low angle, following him into the building from the street. But I love that now he's at the point where now I've got to do something. He's trying to do it without his powers. Very similar. Again, there's lots of callbacks to the first one, which is very interesting. It's not like this is the last movie in a series, like in a trilogy or anything, and there's like tons of callbacks to the first one. Because from what I remember, and I love that little moment, they try to knocking the door down. Ow! But there's not really that many callbacks to the first one and the third one, as far as I'm aware. And that would make more sense as like the finale, but it makes sense in this movie because it's like we're looking at the first one, but now it's more mature. We're looking back on the first one from a different perspective. The characters are in different places in their lives. There's lots of callbacks, subtle callbacks. And obviously there's, the burning building, saving a child, much like the first movie, but now he's doing it without his powers. And maybe it's just me, but I personally think like this still looks pretty good effects wise. Like I think it's pretty well integrated into the scene. Yeah, the scene's real good. So the only other Spider-Man movies I guess to talk about are the Spider-Verse films, which are fantastic. They're absolutely wonderful. You can tell those movies are made by people who are just not just in love with, but obsessed with Spider-Man and celebrating what makes Spider-Man great. The art style, but it's not just flashy and good looking or just pandering. It's the stories are just incredibly well told. There's so much great character work in there. Incredibly well written movies. And those movies are, those movies, the Beyond the Spider-Verse as of this, I don't want to date this too much, but it's not out yet. I actually just recently saw Across the Spider-Verse. Again, fantastic. But those movies are definitely, the biggest cinematic love letter that we've ever gotten for the Spider-Man character. Not just celebrating him, but exploring him and what makes him tick and really what makes the Spider-Man character and Peter Parker special and interesting, and also with Miles Morales and all the different versions of Spider-Man and whatnot. This movie is more so, I would say, comparison. That's why I say like Into the Spider-Verse might be technically it's the biggest love letter to Spider-Man, and there's absolutely an argument that that's the best Spider-Man movie ever made, objectively, But I would say, and by comparison, this movie I view more as just a solid standalone Spider-Man narrative. I think a lot of the best Spider-Man stuff is the singular narratives. So it's just totally down to personal preference. This will probably always be my favorite, but objectively, I think those movies definitely give it a run for its money. But I also don't like comparing. I don't like comparing it because it's a completely different thing. Like, I don't need to talk about, ooh, this movie's better or worse than those movies. I don't care. It's not really what it's about. This scene is great because, and Patrick Willems went into this in his video, but this movie, this scene seems like it really doesn't add anything to the story, and it's kind of shocking that it wasn't cut. But I'm glad that it wasn't cut because, again, this comes in a very surprisingly pivotal moment in Peter's slow arc, eventually learning his lesson. And this is the point where he's beaten down and he's like, well, I tried to save someone without my powers. I tried my best and I still couldn't save everyone. He's like, why can't I be happy? And he's reminded that there are just normal people who just will be there for him and offer him things, and not offer him things necessarily, but people who are there for him and have his back. And there's nice, normal people who he deserves to make a connection with those people. The Oldsmobile we saw back there. I think you saw it earlier in the movie when he first pulled up on his moped scooter. But yeah, the Oldsmobile. Been in every Sam Raimi movie. It's funny, when I saw Doctor Strange 2 in the theater, I specifically asked my friend to tell me, if you see that car, nudge me on the shoulder and tell me you see the car so I can see it when I'm seeing it, when I'm watching the movie. And it happened, the scene where they're in that weird dimension where everything's floating and whatnot. And he nudged me. And I completely forgot that I told him that. So I'm like, he nudges me. I'm like, what's wrong? And then as soon as we got out of the movie, he's like, I saw the car, and I felt like the biggest idiot. Because I just am that stupid. I'm too stupid to live. Anyway, this speech that Aunt May gives coming up is so incredibly well written. I love this whole scene. I love what Aunt May says beforehand. Of nice little joke here about, those dreadful comic books. And what Aunt May says beforehand about, I'm proud of you for stepping up and telling me the truth. It must have been hard. It makes her very sympathetic. She's not cold or distant at all. It just seemed like Peter's in a bad place in his life right now. And there's a subtlety. I think it's pretty subtle, but I guess some people didn't think it was that subtle. So maybe I'm just dumb. But the implication that May or not, Aunt may or not know if Peter is Spider-Man in this scene. There's sort of an implication that she might. I don't think it's definitive that she definitively does or definitively doesn't. And I don't remember. She's only in the third one for one scene, and I don't know if she says anything about that would suggest that she knows at that point if he's Spider-Man or not. Maybe she does. I'll have to rewatch it. Rewatch it again, because again, I've seen these movies so many times. I also like that Aunt May has this more visceral. She appreciates the good in people, but also she has this more visceral appreciation for Spider-Man after being, saved by him. And the callback to this speech that, of course, Peter gives later on is great. He becomes a stronger hero, not because he's literally stronger, and that's how a lot of movies seem to be written is, well, the hero's better and stronger because his muscles are bigger and he can punch more people. That's not how this movie rolls. It's a very classic storytelling. He goes through an arc and he's the better man by the end of the story, and he improves. He gives Doc Ock a speech at the end and calls back to what Aunt May says because now he's a stronger man, and he's learned from it. And the visual metaphor of him going through that like impotence thing with as goofy as that sounds, it might sound. I love the these sort of, again, very subtle, very background. Maybe some would say I'm reading too deep into it, but I don't think so at all. I mean, when you're making a movie and you spend so much time writing, like this is really stuff that, and again, Alvin Sargent, 2-time Academy Award winner for Best Adapted Screenplay. Not that Academy Awards automatically make you good at something, but they are kind of an indication. They are kind of an indication like, okay, maybe you're doing something right, but not going to say that they really mean much in the grand scheme of things. But this whole scene's great, of course. It's a great subversion. It's very funny. But I love the metaphor for impotence paralleling with Doc Ock, with the completely different metaphor of, becoming, an infant and being reborn and more childlike and more juvenile. Because Peter actually ends up he learns his lesson, and he learns it the hard way, slowly and painfully throughout the movie. He needs to learn about his commitment, and things will eventually get better if he just sticks with it, and he has to learn that the hard way. And he ends up being the more mature person, which is ironic because he has the more, adult bodily metaphor than Doc Ock does, who's, more juvenile. And he eventually overcomes it near the end. He eventually redeems himself, but at a great cost. Everyone loves the my back bit, which I love too. My favorite bit's at the end there. He touches the car and the alarm goes off. It's just the perfect little button to put on the end of that scene. I guess maybe I could talk about Sam Raimi in general. The scene's okay. I think it's a little weird that she's, it's a nice little visual, filmy way, that's not a word, filmy way to demonstrate like what she's doing. But it is a little weird from like a character writing standpoint that she tries to kiss him upside down to see if he feels the same. That's a little weird, but yeah, whatever. It's okay-ish. I still think she's mostly pretty well written in this movie. Her decision at the end is a reckless one, but somewhat right. I mean, it's not that reckless. Her deciding to ditch the dude, she can do that. It's a little weird that she like stiffs him at the altar. That's a little weird, but it's an exciting note to end the movie on. It's it brings things full circle of like, well, she makes her decision, and in the third movie, we'll wait to see that, and it is kind of foreboding at the end, really, when she makes that decision to split from him, which we'll see at the end of the movie. But Sam Raimi is a filmmaker that I think is underappreciated in a way because he, as far as I'm concerned, he is one of the greats. I would put him up there with, a Scorsese or a Spielberg or what have you. And a lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people just don't view him that way. And he's and a part of that, I think, is just how humble he is as a filmmaker. I know as humble as a multi-million-dollar making, filmmaker can be, whatever. But, when Spider-Man 3 came out, and from what I remember, I was very young, to be fair, but from what I remember, when Spider-Man 3 came out, the backlash was not necessarily immediate. Everyone just generally kind of like, ooh, Spider-Man 3's out. Yeah, it's good. I can't wait to see it. And then like maybe a month later after it came out, people started to complain a bunch on the internet. Like, oh, he runs in front of the American flag for half a second. Oh, stupid stuff like that. Can't believe that's what people used to care about. People still complain about that kind of stuff, but like, oh my God, And that movie has actual problems you could be complaining about, but everyone made a huge deal about how he runs in front of the American flag for half a second. Anyway, but when that movie came out and the backlash happened, Sam Raimi, his vision, he did not say what certain other filmmakers are saying, say, my vision was compromised. Instead, he apologized. He said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I love this character, and I love all the people who support and love this character too. And if I disappointed you with, I tried my best, and if I disappointed with how I represented the character and told this story, I wish I could have done it better, and I sincerely apologize." And a lot of people say he didn't necessarily need to apologize. It wasn't even necessarily his fault that he needed to put stuff that he didn't want to originally put in. But he's humbled like that because he's an old school guy. This is the guy who got on his hands and knees and literally begged investors for their money when making the original Evil Dead. He did that for years, so he knows how to play ball and kind of do that in order to really get where he is, to get to the point where he can have his vision happen. And sometimes there has to be compromises and stuff. This is a great reveal. Love that. And also a nice, cool little detail of how the tire almost gets him. He just barely gets out of the way, and the sound design there as the tire goes past him is always stuck out in my mind. Sound design in Sam Raimi's movies, I can't just attribute all of that to him, but it is consistently almost always awesome, the sound design in his movies. Listen to Evil Dead 2 and watch it, but you know what I mean? Like the sound editing and sound design in those movies are so otherworldly and so quirky and so memorable. It's so effective. Now, some people have pointed out, and I still haven't been able to find out a sensible, logical explanation for it that I can agree on. When Doc Ock throws the car at Peter Parker, he doesn't know that he's Spider-Man. At least we assume he doesn't. He doesn't. I think it's highly unlikely he does. But, what is the other explanation that you could possibly have for... Why would he throw a car at Peter Parker? Did he just assume he would be alive? That's a pretty bad thing to assume. He's just a regular guy as far as you're aware. So I can't really think of a particularly good explanation for that. This shot, a lot of people complain about the CGI on the fake Alfred Molina and Kirsten Dunst not looking good. On that first shot, I actually thought it looked pretty okay, especially for the time. This shot, it looks a little bit more ridiculous and rubbery, but of course it's off in the distance and it's hidden behind some stuff in the foreground, so it makes it work a little better. And this is a great moment. It's so awesome when he burst out of the rubble, and because his character arc's pretty much complete now. He's learned his lesson, and now it's a call to action. And also, one could say, and I love this reveal and the shot of the glasses falling. Again, another really clever callback to the first one. And this could still kind of work with the impotence metaphor. It could still kind of work because I believe it's true that when a male is threatened by another male, their testosterone level, regarding a woman, their testosterone goes up or whatnot. I think that's true. I'm pretty sure that's true. But it could fall in line with that. Again, it might be driving that too. But I love this. He was the only one who could have stopped Doc. Yes. Great delivery by J.K. Simmons. But also a really cute little funny moment here. He's a thief. And this transition is so comic book in the best possible way. This is where anyone who complains about this being corny, I don't understand how you could complain. If you actually watch this movie front to back, we've just had a bunch of that zoom and this he's back and he bursts through, and then the transition into the shot from behind Doc Ock's sunglasses. It's so great. You could say it's corny, but it's so exciting, and we've just had 40 minutes or whatever, maybe more than that, of just character development and character growth, and now we're back into the action, and we're coming up on one of the most famous and acclaimed action sequences in superhero movies, maybe ever. Especially at the time, this was pretty much the definitive best action scene in a superhero movie. Now, some would say it's been outclassed to a degree, which I definitely think it has more peers now. I still think it's arguably one of the best. It's just so well, again, storyboard, and the effects are really good. They hold up very well. I think it's how they're integrated. Which is interesting, because it's not so much like it's a mixture of practical. because that's what a lot of people say. It's like mixing practical and CG tends to work, and there's a lot of practical work here, of course. But when they're on the train and stuff, that's a digital Alfred Molina, but that's shots in the distance, so they know what they're doing. And there's so much creative stuff with him, with Spider-Man using the webs and Doc Ock using his tentacles. It just so clearly takes great advantage of both of the characters. And then falling on the train here, we get these great reaction shots. We're constantly reminded throughout this entire scene of all the people, innocent people and pedestrians, but the innocent people. There's a Pop-Tart sign there. I never noticed that. I don't know why that made me laugh, but this whole sequence is great. Little duck under there. But we're constantly reminded of the people in danger, which is absolutely essential, I think, in a superhero movie like this one. And there's so many cool little moments where he dodges and dives through things. So many exciting little moments in this, fighting alongside the Thing when he almost gets hit by that train. I mean, it's just cool moment after cool moment. And when he swings out, it's just great. When I was a kid, I would just watch this stuff over and over and over again. And so much stuff happens in such a quick amount of time, but you can mostly follow it, because we have quiet little moments here. I don't remember if there's any music here or not. I'm pretty sure there's either no music, or for that little moment there's either no music or very quiet little amount of music there. And it's this great little quiet, tense moment, broken up by, again, another exciting thing. This shot when he climbs up, I mean, this is just great stuff. There's so much CG at use in these in this entire sequence, but it mostly holds up really well. Like if you really watch it in high definition, and you really slow down and again do the internet thing of nitpick and look at things out of context with the rest of the movie, like, yeah, you'd be like, oh, this CGI is a little dated, but what's not dated is the storytelling and the direction. That guy, oh, I don't remember. Oh, I think that guy, the old guy there, who was the train conductor. Is that the word? No. Oh my gosh. Is that the right word? Train conductor is the train driver. I'm such an idiot. I'm so sorry. I don't remember what the term is, but that guy, the old guy, I believe he was in A Simple Plan. He was in one of Sam Raimi's movies. I think he was in A Simple Plan. But yeah, and also Dan Hicks, who played the character Jake in Evil Dead 2, is also one of the guys on the train. There he is. And also Joey Diaz, who, as far as I'm aware, has not been in any other Sam Raimi stuff. It's just Joey Diaz. It's like Zoe Deschanel. It's just like, well, they're here. I love that line. Any more bright ideas? Again, that's part of the inventiveness. I mean, this is one of the more iconic Spider-Man things. It gets referenced in so much stuff. And you totally get, like, oh man, Spider-Man, he needs to stop this train. He needs to stop it fast. It's a gradual buildup. Tries to use these webs and they break away. And that's a great sort of dolly zoom shot there as the intensity gets more up. Again, we're constantly made aware of all the people that are in danger and all that. It's not just mindless action. As sort of a culmination of him trying to save as many people and a strain of his job and strain of having to become a hero. I mean, to me, in my personal opinion, maybe this might seem hyperbolic to some people, but this in my mind is like one of the great, this is one of the great, like, Hollywood scenes. Like, this scene just sticks out for me. This is like, a scene that will just be referenced and remembered. And when you watch the movie itself, this is just one of those scenes that will stick out in your mind for a long time. the conclusion here, and then the scene's not over, and then he gets kidnapped. But this, the people all coming together and catching him, and the community around Spider-Man embracing him again is a big part of Peter, his appreciation for everyone around him, and like it feels like everyone in the city has it out to get him, but they really don't. And a lot of people, this is another thing that people like to make fun of, and again, out of context, internet nitpicky thing is when this guy says he's just a kid, no older than my son. It's like, Tobey Maguire doesn't look that young. So the guy's like, if the dude was like, a little bit older, people are like, I totally buy it in the moment. It doesn't bother me in the moment. It's just something people say. And I also love, these are Tobey Maguire's brothers coming up here who hand him the mask. And they say, we won't tell nobody. I buy that too in the moment. This is a very nice, tender moment between these just normal people, and they all sort of, because of the tone and the storytelling of the movie and the sincerity of it all, I totally 100% believe that no one's going to try and get a picture of him or anything. Obviously, people don't have phones, but people still had cameras and stuff back then, so they could have. But I believe that they don't. It's a wonderful little moment. This movie's absolutely earned this whole moment. And then it takes a little bit step further. It's not too schmaltzy, because not only does it earn this moment, but it also has that moment of, realness and honesty after that, where all the people come in. It's actually Joey Diaz is the first guy who's like, you want him, you got to go through me, as we'll see in a second here. But, they can't stop him. They all do the right thing, and they're like, you got to go through me, but he obviously immediately stops all of them. And I like that. Hello, Joseph Diaz. This guy in the front who's about to step into frame, there he is. That guy always looked familiar to me, but I guess he's not from anything else. Maybe he is, I don't know. This train is just full of people, like recognizable people. Recognizable if you're a big nerd, but and there's a Burger King sign there. I never noticed that either. I'm noticing all this fast food product placement. I love this transition shot. Talking about Sam Raimi in general, because I just feel obligated to, because I mentioned earlier that I was going to mention his other movies. But I love the Evil Dead movies to death. I legitimately think Evil Dead 2 is a contender for like one of the best movies ever made. I absolutely 100% believe it's a perfect movie. And the original Evil Dead is one of the most inspiring movies ever. It's rough around the edges and it's janky, but that's part of the fun, and it's just so inspiring. And the same can kind of be said for Evil Dead 2, but it's just executed flawlessly. Army of Darkness is also kind of janky and weird in its own ways, but it's so funny and great and entertaining. Darkman is one of the most underrated superhero movies. I'm not even sure if you'd call it a superhero movie. It's such a dark, interesting movie, but again, it's very goofy in places. Check out Darkman if you haven't already. It seems to be growing more of a reputation for now, but before I heard everybody talking about it, I just sort of got it on a whim. It was on Blu-ray at some shop somewhere in some mall I was at for like, $3 on Blu-ray. I was like, oh, cool, Sam Raimi, I'll watch this. And it did not disappoint. Weird, wacky movie, but you can totally see if you watch that movie and you're a big nerd, there's a lot of stuff that Sam Raimi kind of used as inspiration for these movies, and even reused some footage. Oh, yeah. If you know, you know. This moment's great for Harry's character, and I like that. I especially like the way it ends. I almost wish, this is also a small criticism. This is a small little editing criticism. I think the scene should have ended with him saying there are bigger things going on than you and me, and then we cut to the next scene. Because I always remember it doing that, but it doesn't. He says, like, please, Harry, I have to know where he is, and then it cuts, which I think is a little weird. And I like that it takes Harry, he needs to process all this. And if he just repeats himself, he's like, I didn't kill your dad, blah, 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 he's probably still not going to believe him. So it makes sense that he wouldn't say that at the moment. See, I would have cut before he says that line. That's a small, tiny little complaint I have. This is the most Mary Jane moment in any of these movies. And she goes, "Hey, I'm talking to you." I'm like, yes, that's Mary Jane from Queens. I kind of wish there was a bit more of that in these movies. I would not say this is like the definitive Mary Jane at all. I do think there's problems with how she's written and stuff. I don't think they're as big problems as a lot of people would have you believe, though. Love that little shot. Revealing the reveal of Spider-Man. Revealing the reveal, yes. But speaking of Darkman, again, visually, there's just so much that he reuses, not in a lazy way, like, oh, he just reuses, but in a creative way, really uses a lot. But Darkman's such a different character than Spider-Man, which is cool. I always thought Alfred Molina's voice there, I should have known Osborn wouldn't have the swine to finish you. I always thought his voice there was really weird. Like he tried to add some sort of weird accent. Very strange. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe that's just his normal voice and I'm an idiot. I love here when he just like starts clocking him. Uh anyway. Yeah, Darkman's great, and that always makes me laugh. For a little moment there. Darkman's great, and Quick and the Dead's pretty good. A Simple Plan, mandatory viewing, even if you don't care about Sam Raimi. It's just a fantastic movie. Bill Paxton's best performance. Billy Bob Thornton is amazing. He either won or was nominated for an Academy Award, and I think he absolutely deserved to be so. Just an incredible movie. Drag Me to Hell is a lot of fun, and Oz the Great and Powerful is whatever. it is what it is. And For Love of the Game, that's boring. I like the little subversion there. See, and Doctor Strange 2 is it was fun. The more I think about it, it is a very flawed movie. I also think this is very funny, where the reaction shot of him. Yeah, Doctor Strange 2 is pretty fun. So I'm going on this. I felt kind of obligated. It's like, well, I said I was going to talk about Sam Raimi, and I love him to death, so I figured, yeah, why not? These shots, I think the cars had some sort of motors like customized motors so they could travel alongside like that. I don't know how exactly they did that, but it's an impressive shot. I love those shots of just those shots of the cars and stuff. It's really it sells the idea that, although to be fair, if cars from in the city were getting pulled like that, shouldn't that entire warehouse just already be like brought completely down? I don't know, but it sells the grandiosity. Now, this speech here, I love everything about it. I love the callbacks. I love how Peter, wins the day. He wins the day by doing the right thing and being from what he's learned. I love the storytelling here. There's an interesting little bit here. I love the callback itself, but it's a little strange. I think I understand it now, though. He says, "You taught me that intelligence is not a privilege; it's a gift, and that it's a gift to be used for the good of mankind." Here he says, "A privilege," and a lot of people say that's an error in the writing, and maybe it is but I don't think it is. What I think it is, because he did indeed say to Peter earlier in the movie, intelligence is not a privilege; it's a gift. I think what happened there, because after he said that, he goes, "But it was my dream." I believe that he is denying what Peter is saying. He's like, "No, it's not a gift; it's a privilege." I think that's what he's saying. I don't think it's an error in the script, like the writer just forgot what he wrote earlier. I think that's him in denial of what Peter's saying, is how I would take it. and his self-sacrifice at the end here is absolutely earned, and it's done for a purpose. Self-sacrifice is often, it's an easy way in fiction to sort of make us care about a character and make it things emotional. It's sort of cheap in some cases, but this is one of the better examples that I've seen. It's really built up, and narratively it really does serve a great purpose. It closes Doc's arc perfectly. I love Otto Octavius's arc in this movie because he has to sleep in the bed that he's made at this point. It makes sense, like he's too far gone, but he does learn his lesson and he does the right thing. Peter Parker does not have to die, but he does, and that's sad, but someone has to. And Peter Parker has learned his lesson. He convinced him, and really, it did stem from. He's a tragic character because he's sympathetic, but he also flew too close to the sun. One might say literally that he flew too close to the sun because it's the sun and blah, 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 blah. Obviously, yeah, but of course, at the beginning when he says the power of the sun in the palm of my hand, that's before that's literally the moment that things start to go awry. That's literally when, things start to go wrong with his experiment. It's because he has that little taste of power. And that was enough, where he's like, no, it's only a spike. We can't shut it down. The experiment's going so well. From that moment onward, it's that little bit of hubris, that little bit of self-determination gone too far in proving things to someone else. And it's tragic. It really is. The movie absolutely does a great job of sort of delivering a legitimate, heartfelt message in a way that I think really works and is poignant with the rest of the film. That's also a nice last line for him there. Nice little exciting thing here with he jumps out of the way in the nick of time. I don't know what he's swinging on here. Don't know what he's swinging on. I guess there's just a really tall building in the distance. And this final shot for Rock is really great. It's a CGI Alfred Molina, but it looks pretty good. And I love the light dying from the arms. It's a great final poetic, beautiful looking shot that really sums up where his character ended at. It's great filmmaking. It has a real definitive dramatic flair and a finality to it. And there's lots of imagery that has stuck with me long after I've seen this movie. Again, part of that is because I've seen it so many times, but, it's legitimately good filmmaking, great storytelling. Spider-Man will always have enemies. I.e., this character made too much money and we can't stop. But no, it works in the movie. It's a nice little, he sets up everything and he lays it all out for her, and this is why we can't be together. It makes sense. And then her defying that at the end also makes sense for her perspective. And also like that, a lot of people complain that John Jameson's character here, he's about to jump to rescue, and he's right there with the officers, like a good dude. A lot of people complain that he's too bland in this movie. I think that's not really a problem in this movie. That's more so just a missed opportunity with the third one, as mentioned before. They could have just done so much. They could have actually done more with his character, maybe made him take the place of Eddie Brock and make him Venom, or at the least bring Venom down from outer space or something. But he's a good dude in this movie. He's not really like a pompous jerk or anything, and I like that. Maybe he could become a pompous jerk again. Well, not pompous, but he could become more antagonistic in the second one, and he would have an understandable motivation. There's just a missed opportunity. Great shot there too. I love the dissolve into there of him looking that cool pose. It's a great last shot. Not the last shot of the movie, obviously, but it's a great shot to end that. Here we have Harry with this knife. And we're about to get some Dutch angles and some Willem Dafoe laughter, which is always a good combination. The camera just immediately tilts. So the reason, I believe this is true, the reason Willem Dafoe is in this movie is literally he just happened to walk by the set. He's happened to walk by the studio they were in or something, and they're like, "Hey, Willem, long time no see." Or maybe he was like, "Hey, guys, long time no see." And they're like, "You want to be in this movie?" And or maybe I don't know if he asked them or they asked him, but they're like, "Hey, you want to be in this movie?" Or maybe he was like, "Hey, I want to be in this movie." And the other person was like, "Okay." So that's why he's in the movie. I think it works pretty well. I'm surprised that this wasn't in the script. I assume in the original script, maybe he just, I don't know what happened before that point. Maybe maybe Harry was just sitting there alone and he got angry and threw the knife at the mirror out of frustration or something. I'd be interested to hear that. Or maybe they had to change. Maybe that was in the original script or something. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear that because that story always struck me as very funny. But yeah, I mean, what can you say about Willem Dafoe? He's an amazing actor. He gave a great performance in the first one, and he gives a really good performance in that little bit there. And I think his performance in No Way Home is also great, as is Alfred Molina's. I have some problems with maybe some of the details and how that affects movies. It is a little disappointing to me that movies can't be definitive anymore. We got to dredge up things again. But overall, the way that those characters were handled in that movie was very respectful. And they are just dancing circles around Jamie Foxx as Electro. And the sad thing is that his character is much better in that movie than it is in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it's still pretty rough in my opinion. Ugh. But I mean, this was very exciting at the time. And what I really like about this is that little setup there where he's the clear going to be the goblin. He's now has a villainous future ahead of him. But then you see him at the wedding after that. And he just, he's just there smiling. I thought it was a very nice choice to do that. It was a nice foreboding quality to it. There's Harry. He's got kind of a good little subtle I'm nefarious, I'm up to something look to him. Jameson poking his head out here. Very funny. It is a pretty it's not supposed to necessarily be the right thing. I think that's sort of the takeaway from it. It works for the ending of this movie, but I think the third one kind of capitalized on this pretty well, is that they have relationship troubles, of course, after this point, which they should. That just makes sense. But very funny line there. Peter and MJ, they have relationship problems after that, but this is sort of not necessarily supposed to be a good thing. This is her making her decision, and she'd rather be happy and be with who she really wants to be with, but it's also, it's implied that, she may be in over her head, and the decision to leave that guy at the altar is pretty crummy. But and that's another thing where it's just like it works heightened storytelling for a movie, a big cinematic narrative, moments like that, you know. It's supposed to be, I think, on some level, sort of a an omen of sorts. It works for the characters to end the film like this, but it's not supposed to necessarily be like, oh, and then they're just going to live happily ever after. Like it's very clearly foreshadowing and telegraphing, the future drama and troubles that they'll come across, as is per usual in Spider-Man. She makes the decision to, do what she wants to do, but also, that's kind of what Peter did earlier in the film. And that's what triggered his arc. But as long as she, is responsible, that's sort of a positive version of Peter's decision earlier. It's like once she knows the risks and what will be involved, that's so that's her arc. And they could have expanded upon that in the third one, and they kind of do, but it's a bit of a bit of a disappointment, but not nearly as much of a disappointment. I like the fact that the problem is that they're just written to be kind of dumb there's too many plot points and too many villains in the third one that they just needed to they needed certain characters to just act certain ways and be upset at each other and create drama because we got to get to certain points in the story. Um, but it's a great ending to this film. I remember, I think in the third one they used that particular shot of him swinging at the end as like news footage. They do that kind of thing. You see that in a lot of movies where they've used that, and it's like, oh, here's camera news camera footage of Spider-Man swinging. It's just a shot. I mean, it makes sense, save money anyway. But it's a great triumphant ending to this movie. What a great last shot! But it's not the last shot. This last shot of her looking off in the distance, apparently, that is not an intentional. This shot, that is not an intentional homage to the last shot of The Graduate, because on the commentary track, Tobey Maguire asks Sam Raimi if it is, and I don't think he's like, oh yeah, that definitely is. I think he has to be reminded of it and stuff. So maybe on a subconscious level or something. But Bruce Campbell, Snooty Usher. This first credit I see. But yeah, what a great movie. I think I've laid out why I think it's good, and that means it's definitive. Now when your friend asks you, hey, I don't like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. Everyone says Spider-Man 2 is really good, but I don't think it is. Can you offer me a valid reasoning as to why that movie is really good? Just just offer them a copy of the movie on DVD, the normal version, not the extended version, because this won't sync up. Offer them a DVD or Blu-ray or whatever copy, or tell them to watch it on some streaming service, and be like, now go to this YouTube channel and listen to this commentary track by this random guy who doesn't know what he's talking about and is a complete moron and is stuttering and is a lonely dumb fool. Listen to this man. Listen to this man spit in your ear hole, and then boom, they're gonna learn from their evil non-Sam Raimi Spider-Man loving ways. They're gonna go through a wonderful character arc, much like the characters in this film. So yeah, I love this movie, and you just can't go wrong with Spider-Man 2. But did you ever think about that Spider-Man 2? You ever think about how many things are called Spider-Man 2? Holy crap, there's a lot of things called Spider-Man 2. There's this movie, of course. There's The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which, it has the word amazing in it, but, it's still the Andrew Garfield 2014 movie Spider-Man 2. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. See, I just mixed it up. There's the video game adaptation of this movie, which is also called Spider-Man 2. I guess it's also called Spider-Man 2, the game. Which is a great game, by the way. The GameCube and PS2, and I don't know if there was an original Xbox version, but there's multiple versions of that game. There's also a handheld version. There's different versions of it, but I think they were just all called Spider-Man 2. Or I think one of them was just called Spider-Man 2, and then one of the other versions was called Spider-Man 2, the game. And then there's a PC version, which I think was a slightly different game, but very bad. That's the video games. And then there was also a video game adaptation of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And if you're talking about the second MCU movie, you could say, well, that's the second one, but it's not called Spider-Man 2. It's called Spider-Man Far From Home, which is not to be confused with Spider-Man No Way Home, which features the characters from Spider-Man 2, such as Doc Ock and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. But then there's also Across the Spider-Verse, which is sort of a two-parter with Beyond the Spider-Verse. So maybe those two could be considered one overarching narrative. But of course, they're in a trilogy, and there could be more than that. But the point is that it's the second one in that series of films. And then if you go back even earlier, there's games on the Game Boy called Spider-Man 2. There was Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro on the PS1, which was a sequel to the game just called Spider-Man, released on the PlayStation and N64, that came out in the year 2000. And Spider-Man 2 came out in 2001, but not to be confused with Spider-Man 2, this movie, which came out in 2004, or the video games, which also came out in 2004. And there was also a video game on the GameCube, on the Game Boy, called The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is not to be confused with the video game adaptation of the movie The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but there was also a video game called The Amazing Spider-Man, which preceded The Amazing Spider-Man 2 on Game Boy, not to be confused with the movie or the video game adaptation of that. There are so many things called Spider-Man 2. And I'm also pretty sure that there's something called Spider-Man 2, The Sinister Six. There is something called Spider-Man 2, The Sinister Six. I think that's another Game Boy game or a Game Boy Color game or whatever. And that's not to be confused with the NES game Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six, which sounds like it would be the subtitle of Spider-Man 2 because it's Return of the Sinister Six, i.e. it's a sequel. But no, it's like a standalone thing, I'm pretty sure. So basically what I'm trying to say is I really like Spider-Man 2. This one. And a happy 20th anniversary to this movie. Thank you.